Well, hello again, and welcome back to a series that the Learning Research Network, or the LRN, has been putting together for the Fire Foundation as we start this academic 24-25 academic year. Now, my name is Sean Smith, and today what I want to talk to you about is to further enhance student engagement. Yes, the term of COVID, I would argue the term that we've continued to live with post-COVID, and that is our students are just not engaged. Now, we can unpack that in several different ways, and we have about 10 minutes today, so I'm going to get into generally ideas and strategies, but I will offer this tidbit, and that is I would offer the fact that we need to, and Michael, as part of the LRN, talks about formative assessment. Oftentimes, what we think is student engagement or lack of student engagement might be some other indicators of instructional practices that are not meeting the needs of individuals, measures that we're using that are not getting the data that we need, and a host of other components, excuse me for my itchy nose, a host of other components that maybe aren't going to be solved by further engaging our learners, but rather correcting some of our other interventions and practices that we're using in our classroom. But again, a conversation for another day. So let's get into this idea of student engagement, and I want to bring us back to, and maybe you haven't been with me in the past, but I live by the Universal Design for Learning framework. And I live as a scholar here at the University of Kansas, but also as a parent of 4 children, but I have a 23-year-old son with Down syndrome that honestly he would not have been fully included throughout his academic career if it hadn't been for the use of the Universal Design for Learning framework. And I mention it because the framework, although it has 3 primary principles, I want to pursue and focus in on multiple means of engagement. And what the framework offers to me is, yes, it talks about engagement, but more importantly, it offers a map. And when I say a map, is it offers steps, sequence, and a way, and guides me from beginning in a way to the end of facilitating engagement for the individual. So I'm going to deal with the 3 guidelines of the principle of multiple means of engagement. And for those familiar with it, the first guideline is this idea I'm going to recruit the student's interest. Now, there's a variety of ways to recruit a student interest. Now, of course, I've given you a visual here of several ways that the framework talks about recruiting interest in terms of a series of checkpoints. But more importantly to me is that understanding that, one, as an educator, we're actually designing and planning to recruit a child's interest. 2, that we are designing and planning to recruit a child's interest, and meaning that we are doing the effort. I often explain this with the idea of the fact that if we thought of a bicycle, we'd be pedaling, and the students would be, as young children, they wouldn't be pedaling, they'd be sitting behind us, riding along. We're doing all the effort, we're doing all the energy to entertain, to make that connection. And that's for some individuals, depending upon the grade level, depending upon where we are in the academic year, depending upon where we are with the complexity of the content. Maybe that's where we need to be. We need to be recruiting interest and being able to facilitate that. But again, the map of the Universal Design for Learning framework has us going from, well, okay, we recruit interest, but then equally important, we need to be able to facilitate a level of persistence. And so that way we can facilitate through a variety of strategies. And again, I'm offering you some visuals here from the Universal Design for Learning guidelines. But this idea that, okay, so we recruit, but then it gets to a point where the student needs to persist. And back to my bicycle analogy, think of a bicycle with training wheels. And the student now is doing most of the pedaling, but we're there to guide and support and give some direction. Now, again, depending upon the grade level, depending upon the time of year, we may be getting into persistence sometime in the fall. For the time of year for a high schooler, it might be much earlier. For a middle schooler, it might be changing. For someone in kindergarten 1-2, this might be something that we work on as one of our goals for the entire academic year. And then finally, with the framework, we want to get them on that 10 speed, right? We want them to be as independent as possible. So we want them to be able to self-regulate. So we go from this idea of recruiting interest to a point where they can sustain a level of effort and persist. And then finally, this ability to self-regulate, self-monitor, and pretty much be independent in their own learning. Using those ideas and using some of those suggestions I've noted here, and I'll give you some links as part of this presentation, to me those are key components of being able to give us some direction, planning meaningful in a way, and in the end, being able to facilitate that level of engagement. Now let's talk about some very practical ideas besides what I've already shared. One area we know is gamification. And so that could be everything from using Kahoots to a variety of other games like that. But it also could be using simulation. And there's a number of different applications now where we simulate learning, and we have a program in virtual reality that actually runs on an iPad and a Chromebook and headsets and Windows and all that, even though it's virtual reality. But it immerses the individual in the learning experience to teach them social skills. And they go through a series of ideas, and they go through a series of efforts, and they receive support and they receive success. Now, some of these games will give badges, will give some sort of scoring, just like you would if they were playing Fortnite at home. But gamification is increasingly offering simulations and other ideas, and again, something as simple as Kahoots and other types of different technologies that are really reinforcing that level of engagement. But also with technology, it can further personalize. So for example, by completing something and being able to graph my data and see my data and see where I've had success, but also give that feedback immediately about what I need to do next. And maybe not only with the feedback about what I need to do next based on some challenges, but how I do it. That's tremendous. Students need that level of feedback. So yes, I can do it in gaming, but I can also do it in just general technology. So if I have it built in, be it my learning management systems, let's say Google Classroom, so I'm completing my Google form, and I have it preset where that when they respond, I tell them then graphically how they've done, but also an understanding of what they scored well, what they scored incorrectly, whether they need further assistance. And again, Google Form, it's free, it's easy to do. A lot of other technologies do it, but part of that personalized learning in our learning management system, a lot of that success. There's also a number of applications we may select that are more content managed, and that is that the system already has all the content built in, and they've created not only the content but also the assessments that go along with it. Those can be very essential and very supportive to give that student an immediate feedback that really benefit from for further engagement. But also opportunities for the student through personalized learning technology to reflect. It might be the fact that the technology that we built in, again, a learning management and content management system. It might be the AI increasingly now offering them prompts and questions, and giving that feedback as they go along with trying to problem solve helps that overall engagement. It connects them with what they're trying to do and reinforces it as they go along. Now we know also student choice, so it could be the fact that we give them options and choice in a very structured manner, so we're not giving them anything they want to do, but very purposeful, but more than just one option. For example, to share or actually demonstrate what they understand. So it might be the fact that they could do something from a writing perspective, but maybe they do something from a presentation or a podcast or a video cast, or maybe they complete some sort of effort at home and they videotape that and show that as an outcome. It all aligns with the same rubric, but in so doing, they're given choice a little bit more power, therefore a further level of engagement to be able to demonstrate what they know. And again, we direct that, but we give them those options and give them those choice. Simply offering the child the understanding of the goals that we're trying to educate. I'll give you a link to this as well in terms of from Universal Design for Learning perspective. But we know if the student understands what we're trying to teach them, where we're trying to take them, the expectation in terms of the overall goal, and do it in a language that they understand, and it's tied to the assessment we're going to use, where the student can crosswalk between, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do, and oh, this is how it's assessing, and this is how it's meaningful, goes a long, long way of helping learners, particularly struggling learners and those with disabilities. So I could go on and on and on. I've mentioned immediate feedback. I've mentioned options in terms of assessment. Michael offers in this same series some connections to formative assessments. It's even also offering the checklists or scaffolds as I go through and complete a task. Many of our learners, especially those struggling and those with disabilities, may not know they've actually completed a task successfully. One, it may that they be lack of understanding from a goal perspective because they don't understand the goal because it's not in the language they understand. We haven't clarified it, whatever it may be. But also that checklist in terms of, oh, I've completed that task. I'm done. Excellent. So they're understanding that, oh, good, I'm done here. I move on. Level of accomplishment, an understanding that I can now move on and or I've met that goal. And then finally, the embedded supports, visual aids, visual supports, not only taking language and visualizing it for them to understand. 3 branches of government could be visualized from the 3 branches of government in terms of buildings. It could be visualized in so many different ways to break down this idea of executive, legislative, and judicial. But also in terms of visual supports, it could be, this is my schedule for my day, or this is a sequence of how photosynthesis works, or this is how the element of causes of the Civil War, or it could go on and on and on in terms of visuals to further embed supports, but also illustrate what it is I'm trying to share. All those things further understand, but also engage the learner, connect the learner, conceptualize, take abstract ideas to make them more motivated and more engaged in their own learning. So I'll end where I began, and that is, while there's lots of different ideas and technologies and tools, if we use a framework like Universal Design for Learning, it gives us that structure to decide, I'm trying to recruit interest, here are some tools I could use. I'm trying to facilitate persistence or sustain effort, here are some additional tools I can use. And finally, I want to be able to allow them to self-regulate. That's going to be different from that recruiting interest, and here's some other tools I can utilize. Together, that's really going to further facilitate the level of engagement, not only for all learners, but particularly our struggling learners and those with disabilities that really require it. Hope this information was helpful. Have a great rest of the day, and hopefully, again, these series from the Learning Research Network, or the LRN, have been helpful to you as you prepare, or maybe as you are now engaged in the academic year. Have a great one.